When I was 21 years old, I went on my very first hunting trip. It was an adventure that combined camping and hunting, and I was accompanied by my friends Alex, Chris, Tim, and Tim's girlfriend, Sophia. Our destination was a beautiful park nestled in the mountains of Colorado, where we hoped to hunt majestic elks. Before setting off, we made sure to pack everything we needed for our expedition. We brought 2 spacious tents, big enough for all of us to sleep comfortably, along with warm sleeping bags to protect us from the chilly nights. We also packed enough food and drinks to sustain us for 2 days in the wilderness. And of course, we carried our hunting rifles, although I must admit I wasn't too familiar with mine. It was a simple-looking hunting rifle that Alex had given me, and I couldn't even recall its name. To be honest, I had mixed feelings about hunting. The idea of taking the life of a living, breathing animal just for sport didn't sit well with me. Animals have their own desires and will to live, just like us humans. But despite my reservations, when Alex had persistently invited me to join them on previous hunting trips, I felt compelled to say yes this time. I decided that I wouldn't shoot any animals myself and would simply observe the experience. As we embarked on our journey, driving towards the park, we made a midway stop at a parking lot. We unloaded our gear from the car and began hiking into the woods, which stretched for about a mile before reaching our chosen campsite. Excitement and anticipation filled the air as we set up our camp, with Alex leading the way and enthusiastically sharing hunting techniques. I tried to lighten the mood by jokingly suggesting that we should all remain silent to avoid scaring away potential prey. But my attempt at humor didn't sit well with Alex. It was clear that hunting was something he took very seriously, so I decided to keep my thoughts to myself from that point forward. As we continued our hunt, something strange and unsettling occurred. We stumbled upon a peculiar group of men deep within the woods. These men were big, dirty, and had long, unkempt hair. They appeared as if they belonged to a remote and isolated community, hidden away from society. As we cautiously passed them, they nodded their heads in acknowledgement, giving us an eerie greeting. The sight of them sent shivers down our spines, especially considering our remote location, far from the parking lot, which we had noticed was completely empty. It may sound exaggerated, but those men seemed like the creepy type, as if they could be dangerous. Thankfully, they didn't follow us, allowing us to proceed with our hunt. While we didn't encounter any elks, Alex managed to successfully hunt a deer. We dragged the deer back to our campsite, where Alex and Tim skillfully went through the messy process of skinning and gutting it. Although I couldn't stomach watching it for more than a few seconds, I couldn't deny the skill and resourcefulness displayed by Alex. He prepared venison burgers, complete with buns and all, turning our fresh catch into our dinner for the night. Nightfall arrived, and we settled down in our tents with the comforting crackle of the campfire outside. Alex, Chris, and I were sharing one tent, while Tim and his girlfriend Sophia were in the other. While Alex and Chris appeared to fall asleep quickly, I found myself struggling to get comfortable in my sleeping bag. Hours passed as I tossed and turned, unable to find a restful position. Just as frustration started to set in, a strange sound caught my attention. The unmistakable footsteps outside our tents. I held my breath, debating whether to call out to Tim or Sophia, but a nagging feeling prevented me from doing so. Instead, I feigned sleep and listened intently. Within moments, the zipper to our tent slowly descended, causing my heart to race. Panic surged through my veins, but I maintained my stillness. The zipper then closed again, and the footsteps moved away, seemingly heading towards Tim and Sophia's tent. I deduced that it must be them checking if we were asleep so they could have their private moments together. Feeling mischievous, I decided to play a harmless prank on them. Waiting for about 5 minutes to elapse, I unzipped our tent ever so quietly and crept toward Tim and Sophia's tent. However, as I approached, a strange realization dawned on me. Their tent zipper was already open. Confusion washed over me, but before I could process it further, my eyes widened in horror at the sight before me. Inside their tent were 2 men, engaged in something sinister with Sophia. Shock paralyzed me for an instant, and then I let out a scream as loud as I could, driven by fear and the desperate hope of waking everyone up. Within seconds, Alex and Chris burst out of their tent, armed with their rifles. The 2 intruders fled from Tim and Sophia's tent, their actions exposed. But what happened next chilled us to the core. As Alex and Chris fired warning shots toward the fleeing men, we realized we were surrounded. Men, previously concealed in bushes and behind trees, emerged from all directions, scattering into the night. It was a haunting sight, leaving us petrified and unsure of their intentions. Were they part of some secluded inbreeding clan or even a cannibalistic family? We had no clue, but our primary relief was that Tim and Sophia had been injected with some tranquilizer, leaving them unconscious. With no choice but to wait for Tim and Sophia to awaken, we anxiously monitored our surroundings. 30 agonizing minutes ticked by as we kept a watchful eye, praying for their swift recovery. Once they regained consciousness, we wasted no time. Fear propelled us as we ran through the pitch-black forest, our hearts pounding with each step. Safety resided solely at the distant refuge of our car. The whole experience was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. We couldn't fathom the true nature of those people who had sought to harm Tim and Sophia. We were just grateful that we managed to escape with our lives intact. My husband and I were parents to two lovely children, a 6-year-old boy named Tom and an 8-year-old girl named Sophia. Something strange started happening in our house. It was back in 2015, and little did we know that our nights would never be the same again. Every night, between the hours of 12 and 5 a.m., Tom would come running to our bedroom, crying and scared. He would say that someone or something was in his room, standing at the edge of his bed. The thought sent shivers down our spines. What could possibly be frightening our sweet boy? We comforted him at first, checking his room to make him feel better. The closet door was always open, and when we asked Tom why, he insisted that it was because the thing in his closet was real. We tried to reassure him that there was nothing there, but he would go back to sleep only when we showed him the empty closet. Oddly enough, our daughter Sophia never experienced anything similar. It was just Tom who had these nighttime encounters. It worried us deeply, seeing our little boy so scared and anxious night after night. We decided to let him sleep on the floor in our room with a cozy blanket for a few nights, hoping it would provide some comfort. However, as the nights went by and Tom's fears persisted, we decided to humor him one more time. We asked him to draw what he saw at the foot of his bed. Once his drawing was complete, we were left completely stunned. His drawing was chilling, enough to give anyone nightmares, let alone a 6-year-old. There was a figure reminiscent of something from a horror movie like The Grudge, and something else was also there at the window. When we questioned him about the figure at the window, he said he sometimes saw it there too, when it wasn't at the foot of his bed. Feeling a mix of fear and concern, we decided to try a different approach. We moved Tom's bed to the spare bedroom across the hall, a room without any big closets. We hoped that the change of location would bring him some peace and help him sleep better. But despite our efforts, the encounters still continued, and our hearts sank. We had hoped that the new room would provide Tom with a sense of safety. However, it seemed that whatever it was, it followed him even to the spare bedroom. Tom's visits to our room in the middle of the night persisted, though they became less frequent over time. Each time he came running, fear etched on his face. We would hold him close, trying to calm his racing heartbeat and assure him that we were there for him. Months turned into years, and Tom slowly grew older. The encounters, though still occurring on occasion, became less intense and terrifying. And slowly, as time went by, the visits to his room became less frequent until one day, they stopped altogether. The memories of that time remained etched in our minds, a reminder of the mysterious and unsettling events that unfolded in Tom's room. On a Saturday night, around 1 a.m, I was driving down a road called Meadow Lane in my hometown. It was a road I often took to get home, and it stretched for a long distance, with nothing but trees on either side, occasionally interrupted by a house or two. The road was deserted, as usual, at this late hour, with no other cars in sight. As I drove, I turned on the extra lights on my Jeep to have better visibility on the dark, unlit highway. To my surprise, in the distance, I spotted someone standing by the side of the road. As I got closer, I noticed that the person was sticking out their thumb, signaling that they needed a ride. My heart started pounding, unsure of what to do. Should I stop and offer help? With a mix of curiosity and caution, I decided to slow down and get a better look at the person. He appeared to be a young man, maybe around 28 years old, wearing a light gray hoodie with a hood over his head and blue jeans. At that moment, I had to make a quick decision. Against my better judgment, I stopped my Jeep, rolled down the window, and asked, "Where are you heading, friend?" In a deep and quiet tone, he replied, "Just up the road." Hesitant but still determined to lend a hand, I called out, "Hop in!" He opened the door slowly, but when he tried to close it, the tight seal of the Jeep's doors prevented it from shutting properly. Polite as ever, I said, "Oh, the door didn't shut, just open it and slam it hard. These doors are a bit tricky." To my unease, he responded with unsettling body language. After about 3 seconds of silence, he looked at me, slowly turned his head to the right, and waited for another 3 or 4 seconds before finally opening the door and slamming it shut. The way he moved sent a shiver down my spine, and I already regretted my impulsive decision to let him into my car. Without wasting any more time, I put my foot on the gas pedal and accelerated, driving faster than the speed limit of 55 miles per hour. I wanted to get this guy to his destination as quickly as possible. Feeling the need to break the uncomfortable silence, I asked, "So, how far did you say you're going?" An awkward gap of silence filled the car before he replied, "Just a few miles up." I considered turning on the radio to ease the tension, but something inside me warned against it. Instead, I focused on the road, trying to ignore the feeling of his gaze fixated on me from the corner of my eye. It felt like a heavy weight, but I resisted the urge to look back. Finally, he turned his head the other way and spoke. "You know, I've been wondering for the longest time if it's worth it to end it all." Confusion washed over me as I looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Then, as if to emphasize his words, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a big red knife. My stomach dropped and fear consumed me. "Put the knife away immediately!" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. In a calm and emotionless voice, he replied, "Pull over next to that sign." I did as he said, coming to a stop beside a speed limit sign. What happened next still haunts me to this day. He started to slit his forearm next to 3 other scars from previous cuts. Letting out a disturbing moan, my words came out in a panic. "You need to get out of my car right now, buddy!" He looked at me again and said, "Get out of the car. I want to show you something." Fear gripped me tightly as he raised the knife, using it as an obvious threat. I knew my life was in danger, and I had to be smart. Summoning all my courage, I said, "Yeah, okay, man, let's go." Opening the door to my Jeep, I made sure to leave it wide open. I raised my hands in the air and slowly backed away from the car. He followed suit, leaving the car and walking towards my side. At that critical moment when he was directly behind the car, I seized the opportunity. I jumped back in, threw the car into drive, and floored it down the road, never daring to look back. Breathing heavily and feeling a mix of relief and terror, I made it back home within 10 minutes. The whole experience left me shaken to my core, and I couldn't shake the feeling of wanting to vomit. It was, without a doubt, the scariest thing that had ever happened to me. On a Saturday night, I went to a bar with a couple of my friends. We were excited to have a fun night out, but things didn't go as planned. We ended up getting really drunk and eventually spread out throughout the bar, talking to different people. To be honest, I wasn't feeling the whole bar scene that night. I was having a bad night, and the loud music and crowded space overwhelmed me. So, I decided to call an Uber to take me home, which was about 15 minutes away. When my Uber arrived, I was surprised to see an old, crappy-looking Honda Accord from around 2003 pull up in front of the bar. The car was a mess, with books and other stuff scattered all over the front seat. I knocked on the window and asked the driver, whose name was Tony according to the app, if he was my Uber. He nodded, so I reluctantly got into the passenger seat. The whole car was a mess. Even the back seats were cluttered with junk. Tony didn't seem like the kind of Uber driver who liked to make conversation or joke around, so I decided to keep silent. I was pretty drunk though, so my memories of that ride are hazy. I vaguely remember texting people and feeling completely out of it. The next thing I knew, I woke up the next morning and realized my phone was missing. Panic set in, and I searched everywhere, turning my room upside down, hoping to find it. Hours passed, and despite my desperate search, I had to accept the unfortunate truth that I must have lost my phone the night before. In a last-ditch effort, I had my brother text all my friends, asking if they had seen my phone. Unfortunately, none of them had it. But then, I remembered something important. I had recently activated the Find My iPhone feature on my phone. Excitement rushed through me as I told my brother to track my phone using the Find My iPhone app. Sure enough, my iPhone appeared on the map, but it was located in a part of town known for being rough and dangerous. I knew I had to go retrieve it, but I didn't want to go alone. My brother agreed to come with me, both to help track the phone and to provide backup if needed. We pulled up to a small, box-like house that matched the location of my iPhone on the map. It had 2 windows in front and 1 on the upper level. It was still early evening, around 8 or 9 p.m., so my brother and I decided to take a chance and rang the doorbell. However, it seemed like the bell didn't work, so I knocked on the door with all my might. We waited anxiously, and soon we heard footsteps approaching the front door. The sound of creaking wood indicated someone was inside. As we waited, I had a feeling that someone was watching us through the peephole on the door. After what felt like an eternity, the door cracked open, and a raspy voice asked who it was. We explained the situation, mentioning the lost iPhone and how I suspected it might be in the Uber driver's car. At first, the man played dumb, pretending not to know anything, but when I pointed out his old Honda Accord in the driveway, he couldn't deny it any longer. He opened the door fully, revealing himself to be, indeed, my Uber driver. His whole demeanor was unsettling, lacking social skills and appearing unfriendly. He invited us inside, instructing us to shut the door behind us. Reluctantly, we entered, hoping to retrieve my phone. The man went upstairs, telling us to wait in the tiny hallway. As we stood there, I couldn't help but notice the outdated and archaic design of the house. The floral wallpaper, reminiscent of the 1930s, covered every wall. The stairs leading upstairs were creaky and sounded like they were about to collapse. We listened to the man's footsteps as he walked around upstairs. Each creak of the floor accompanied his movements. But suddenly the footsteps stopped directly overhead, and an uncomfortable silence settled in. My brother and I grew impatient, calling up the stairs to offer help, but there was no response. My brother suggested that I go upstairs to check on him, and reluctantly, I started ascending the creaky stairs. As I reached the halfway point, I noticed how unbelievably dark it was upstairs, making me question how the man could even search for my phone in such darkness. I finally reached the top and found 3 open doors, 2 leading to bedrooms and 1 to a bathroom. The entire upstairs was devoid of light except for a faint glow from a nightlight in the hallway. I called out for the man again, but there was no answer. I called down to my brother, letting him know that the lights were off and something didn't feel right. However, he didn't respond for some reason. I mustered the courage to check the bathroom first, but it was empty. As I approached one of the bedrooms, passing the cracked door of the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of something through the crack. A chilling sight. The man was hiding behind the bathroom door, holding something in his hand. It felt as though his eyes were fixated on me, but I quickly averted my gaze, pretending I hadn't seen anything. I knew I had to get downstairs immediately. Nervously, I called out to the man, informing him that I would be heading downstairs and would be right back. I quickened my pace, almost jumping down the stairs, and as soon as I reached the bottom, I bolted towards the front door, screaming for my brother to follow. My brother emerged from one of the other rooms downstairs, where he had been snooping around. Without questioning what had happened, he quickly joined me outside, and we rushed to the car. Fear and adrenaline coursed through our veins as I explained everything that had transpired. The first thing we did was dial 911 to call the police. We provided them with the address, and an officer arrived at the house where we had encountered the man. We showed the officer the Find My iPhone app on my brother's phone, proving that my phone was inside that house. Together, we approached the door, and the officer knocked. To our relief, the man answered the door, and the officer demanded that he retrieve my phone. This time, the man didn't hesitate. He went upstairs and returned within seconds, handing over my phone. My brother and I pleaded with the officer to arrest him or take some action, as we believed he had sinister intentions when he was hiding behind the bathroom door. However, to our dismay, the officer said there was nothing he could do. As we left the house, the Uber driver cast me the most disgusting and evil stare I had ever witnessed. Filled with a mix of fear and anger, I gave him the middle finger before turning away. Even now, the memory of seeing him behind that door, holding something in his hand, sends shivers down my spine. The thought of what could have happened haunts me. I was a police officer in a small town called Green Valley. I want to tell you about one of the scariest things that happened to me during my years on the force. It was a quiet night, and I was driving my police car along the dirt roads, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. As I cruised down a road surrounded by tiny woods on both sides, something caught my attention. I saw some person quickly jumping into the woods on the left. They disappeared so fast that I could only see half of them. My heart started racing, and I knew I had to investigate. I parked my car closer to the woods and cautiously shone my flashlight into the darkness. I couldn't see anyone, and fear started to creep in. But it was my duty to check it out, so I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, ready for anything. As I ventured into the woods, every rustle of leaves made me jump. The tension was thick in the air. Suddenly, I heard a branch snap behind a tree, and my whole body froze. I called out, my voice trembling, demanding the person to come out. And then, there they were. A figure wearing a mask emerged from the shadows. I pointed my gun, my hands shaking, and ordered them to raise their arms, remove the mask, and approach me slowly. But they hesitated, refusing to take off the mask. Panic surged through me as I yelled, trying to assert my authority. They seemed like they might comply when their attention shifted, and they glanced to their left and back at me. At that moment, I heard footsteps approaching from my right. My heart pounded against my chest as I scanned my surroundings. I couldn't believe what I saw. Masked strangers began emerging from different directions, surrounding me in a menacing circle. About 10 of them, half of them holding axes and other dangerous objects. I stood there, my gun aimed but trembling, feeling like I was going to be sick. The silence was shattered by one of them, their voice muffled and deep, commanding me to go away. My heart sank as I realized they wanted me to live, but the fear remained overwhelming. Without wasting a second, I turned and ran towards my car, the adrenaline urging me to escape. I sped down the road, my mind racing, and desperately called for backup. When the search SWAT team arrived, the eerie group of masked strangers had vanished from the woods. It was a chilling encounter that left me with a haunting theory. I believed I stumbled upon a twisted secret society plotting to trap innocent passers-by. They must have recognized my police car and attempted to hide. If I hadn't been a police officer, I feared they would have stopped me, led me into the woods, and subjected me to their sick and twisted acts. In early June, my son Nelson, who was 9 years old, and I embarked on a long road trip to visit our family in a beautiful place called West Virginia. The journey was quite challenging, as our car's air conditioning wasn't working, and it happened to be an incredibly hot day. We were feeling a bit stressed and exhausted by the time we reached the 6th hour of driving. As the day slowly turned into night, around 9 p.m., we found ourselves still on the interstate. Suddenly, Nelson started complaining that he desperately needed to use the bathroom. The tension between us had been building up even before this, and his constant complaints led to a small argument. It was about personal matters that I preferred not to share with the whole wide internet. Just when I was feeling overwhelmed, I spotted a blue sign that zoomed past us on the interstate. It was a sign for a rest area. Without hesitation, I steered our car towards it, hoping to find some relief. The rest area was modest, with a small building consisting of 2 bathrooms, a few vending machines, and a handful of benches. There were no other cars parked nearby except for a big white pickup truck. As I pulled up next to the building, Nelson hurriedly got out and rushed towards the bathroom. I decided to leave the car running, knowing that he would be back shortly. In the midst of our tense atmosphere, I thought the rest of the ride would be peaceful. But after about a minute, the back door suddenly swung open. I wanted to say something to Nelson, but I found myself at a loss for words. I stayed quiet, and we continued driving. To my surprise, the white pickup truck parked nearby also began to leave as soon as we started to drive. In fact, it started following closely behind me as I veered back onto the interstate. I switched to the left lane, and the pickup truck did the same. It started flashing its lights at me, causing me to believe the driver was merely an aggressive motorist. However, when I switched to the right lane, the pickup truck followed suit, still flashing its lights persistently. Feeling a mixture of confusion and unease, I decided to slow down and pulled into the right lane. The pickup truck maintained its position in the middle lane, gradually catching up to me. As soon as it reached my side, the driver slowed down and lowered his window. I did the same, trying to make sense of the situation. The driver started yelling something at me, frantically pointing at my car. Initially, his appearance seemed eerie and suspicious. However, due to the noise of the road, I couldn't make out a single word he was shouting. Frustrated, he gestured for me to pull over to the side. In my mind, I told myself to stay calm and composed, ready to take action if this situation turned dangerous. The pickup truck pulled up behind me on the grass, and the man swiftly jumped out, running towards my car. Filled with adrenaline, I swiftly shifted my car back into drive, my heart racing as I prepared to drive away. But then, he screamed, "Wait!" He reached my window, and in a breathless voice he said, "That's not your kid!" Pointing towards the back seat, he repeated, "That's not your kid that got in your car!" Confusion overwhelmed me as I stared at the man, unable to comprehend his words. "What?" I stammered, trying to grasp the situation. He clarified, "The person who just got out of your car. That's not your son." Suddenly it dawned on me. I turned to look at the back right side door, and to my astonishment, I saw a stranger stepping out of my car, instead of my son Nelson. Without any hesitation, the mysterious person disappeared into the nearby woods. I stood there, speechless and shocked. Turning my attention back to the pickup truck driver, I could see the concern in his eyes. He had intervened in a potentially dangerous situation. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I thanked him profusely before he returned to his original spot. A sense of panic began to consume me as I thought about what could have happened to Nelson. Without wasting a single moment, I got back into my car and swiftly crossed the grassy area between the interstate and the rest area. Determined to find Nelson, I drove back to where we had initially stopped. To my immense relief, the pickup truck driver followed my lead and arrived at the rest area within just 30 seconds. There, standing outside the restroom, was Nelson, slightly confused but unharmed. He got back into the car, and I couldn't help but hug him tightly, expressing how relieved I was to see him safe and sound. Between catching my breath, I explained everything that had transpired to him, making sure he understood the seriousness of the situation. The pickup truck driver, with genuine concern in his eyes, also shared his account of what he had witnessed. We thanked him once again, deeply grateful for his intervention and assistance. With our hearts pounding, we resumed our journey. When we finally reached our family in West Virginia, we couldn't wait to share the extraordinary tale with them. I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of disturbance, imagining what might have transpired had I turned around to face the stranger who had entered my car. I had an unforgettable experience while covering my friend's shift at a pizzeria. You see, my friend usually worked as a delivery boy while I handled the register. On this particular night, destiny had a strange plan in store for me. It started like any other ordinary night. I made 2 deliveries to regular customers, and everything seemed fine. Little did I know that my manager had one final delivery for me that night, and it was to a place I had never heard of before. The address led me 5 miles away from the pizzeria into a quiet town that felt strangely unfamiliar. As I followed the instructions from the GPS, it directed me down some side roads that were eerily silent. Half of the streetlights were not even on, casting long shadows that made me uneasy. The town seemed abandoned, with only a few scattered houses in sight. I couldn't help but feel a knot of unease forming in my stomach. Finally, I arrived at the house for the delivery. It was a small, single-story dwelling that appeared aged and worn. I rang the doorbell, and within seconds the door creaked open, revealing an older man in his late 50s. His few remaining hairs were gray, and his face was pale, accentuated by a gray mustache. He gave me a smile, but there was something about his demeanor that sent a shiver down my spine. He greeted me kindly and said he would be right back. As he disappeared into the house, leaving me standing in the chilly night air, a sense of discomfort enveloped me. The area and the man's appearance didn't sit well with me, and I just wanted to deliver the pizza and leave. Minutes ticked by, and the sound of creaking floors echoed from inside the house. The man finally reappeared at the doorway with another smile, insisting that I should come inside where it was warm. I hesitated, telling him it was okay, but he persistently nudged me to enter his house. The freezing temperature, perhaps clouding my judgment, made me foolishly step inside the sketchy stranger's house. The moment I crossed the threshold, the door shut abruptly behind me. I found myself in a dimly lit room that wasn't much warmer than the outside. It became evident that the man didn't even have a proper heating system. the uncomfortable feeling intensified, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. As I inched closer to the door, desperately searching for an escape route, the man emerged from another room, wearing a smile that sent shivers down my spine. He opened a door that led to the basement and peered down, telling me that he usually keeps his money there. He asked me to accompany him downstairs, but a surge of fear compelled me to refuse. From where I stood, peering into the pitch-black abyss of the basement, I knew it was a risk I couldn't take. The silence was broken by a creaking step, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. Someone else was down there, lurking in the shadows. Panic washed over me, and I knew it was time to escape. I swiftly turned around, reaching for the doorknob, only to find the man right on top of me. Instinctively, I threw a punch, managing to land it on his face. With a momentary advantage, I got him on hold, but the sound of heavy footsteps thudding up the basement stairs shattered any sense of victory. Realizing the imminent danger, I released my grip and bolted towards the exit. Bursting through the door, I sprinted towards my car, not daring to look back. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I hopped into the vehicle and sped away, leaving that nightmarish house behind. Once I arrived back at the pizzeria, I wasted no time in recounting the harrowing experience to my manager. Concerned for my well-being, he immediately contacted the police and shared the details of the incident. The police launched an investigation into the mysterious house on Elm Street, and it was soon revealed that the older man and the person lurking in the basement were part of an organized crime syndicate involved in the illegal trade of organs. The authorities swiftly apprehended them, and the house was thoroughly searched, uncovering evidence of their nefarious activities. The arrest of these organ sellers brought an end to their sinister operations and ensured that no more innocent people would fall victim to their wicked deeds. Since then, I've learned a valuable lesson that will stay with me forever. Never enter a stranger's house, no matter how uncomfortable the circumstances may be. It serves as a constant reminder to trust my instincts and prioritize personal safety above all else.